Ms. Ralph, can you call the case?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, this is a co-defendant case, State of Georgia versus Anthony Autrey, as well as Taekwonta Luckett. Mr. Autrey and Mr. Luckett are both here by way of Zoom from the Gwinnett County Jail. Mr. Luckett is represented by Ms. Fagan, who also joins us by way of Zoom. Mr. Autrey is represented by Mr. Lewis, who also joins us by Zoom. State's witness is ready, Your Honor. Mr. Autrey is charged in warrant numbers 21W05814 through 5823, respectively, for possession of marijuana with intent to distribute, possession of, it says amphetamine and dextroamphetamine with intent to distribute, possession of oxycodone with intent to distribute, possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, possession of alprazolam with intent to distribute, possession of oxycodone with intent to distribute, possession of promethazine with intent to distribute, and possession of a firearm during commission of a felony, as 5822, 5821, and 5823. Then on Mr. Luckett, he is charged in warrant numbers 21W05824 through 21W05833, respectively, for possession of marijuana with intent to distribute, possession of amphetamine or dextroamphetamine with intent to distribute, possession of oxycodone with intent to distribute, possession of cocaine with intent to distribute, possession of alprazolam with intent to distribute, possession of oxycodone with intent to distribute, possession of promethazine with intent to distribute, and then the last three warrants are possession of a firearm during commission of a felony for each of them, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Luckett and Autrey, I'm Judge Jerem. This is your preliminary hearing. As you may have heard from your attorneys, today's hearing is not about guilt or innocence. It's about probable cause and whether your case continues through the system as charged, and also potentially a discussion of bond if that's applicable. We're holding this hearing by Zoom because of the virus. All parties have agreed to hold it that way. Now, normally the public can come in and out and observe these proceedings. I'm sitting in an open courtroom today, but because we've elected to hold this hearing by Zoom, the way we're making it available to the public is we are streaming this live on YouTube. Now, I tell you that to give you a couple instructions. One, if at any point either of you cannot hear us during the hearing, hold your hand up to the camera like that and leave it there, and we'll make sure we get that fixed for you. And two, we don't know who's watching the YouTube feed. So be careful how you react to the testimony, whether you agree with it or not. Any hand gestures, head nods, mouthing words, any gestures like that. We don't know who's watching, and we don't know what they'll make of those gestures. So just be careful how you react. All right, Ms. Ralph, you can swear your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Investigator Carrero, if you'll raise your right hand, you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God.
I do.
Thank you. And please state your name for the record.
My name is Investigator Carrera with the Duluth Police Department, currently assigned to the Gwinnett Metro Task Force.
And are you familiar with the cases involving Mr. Anthony Autrey and Taekwonta Luckett regarding the warrant numbers I previously read out to the court?
Yes, ma'am.
And please tell us what led you to obtain these warrants.
On April 21st, 2021, I, Investigator Carrera, along with Gwinnett Metro Task Force, requested assistance from the Lilburn and Swanee SRT to execute a magistrate search warrant 21X00486 at the Durant at Sugarloaf Apartments, located at 50 St. Marlowe Drive, Lawrenceville, Georgia, 30044, on apartment 223 in Gwinnett County. Apartment 223 is a 715 square foot, one bedroom, one bathroom apartment. During the execution, SRT encountered 9 individuals, one of which was Mr. Luckett and one was Mr. Autrey. Once the occupants were detained, GMTF began the search of the apartment, and the following items were located in the apartment: a Glock 27 handgun in the bedroom, a Glock 22 handgun in the bedroom, 1.3 grams of marijuana in the living room, a Glock 22 handgun in the bedroom, 9.7 grams of marijuana in the bedroom, 65 grams of marijuana in the kitchen, 105.4 grams of marijuana in the living room, half a bottle of promethazine in the kitchen.
Okay, hold on, I'm sorry. I lost you at 9.7 grams in the bedroom.
9.7, okay.
After that.
Then 65 grams located in the kitchen, 105.4 grams in the living room, half a bottle of promethazine in the kitchen, 7.5 partial pills of aprazolam in the kitchen, an unknown coarse powder, which was gray and purple, in the kitchen, 20.7 grams of cocaine in the kitchen, 3.8 grams of marijuana in the kitchen, 11 orange amphetamine pills in the kitchen, 46.9 grams of marijuana in the living room, white unidentified pill in the patio closet, 79 white round oxycodone pills in the patio closet, 75 oblong oxycodone pills in the patio closet, 3 full liquid bottles of promethazine in the closet in the patio, 348 grams of marijuana in the patio closet, 260 grams of marijuana in the bathroom, a Taurus G3 handgun in the living room, a Glock 27 handgun in the living room, a Glock 26 handgun in the living room, a red iPhone that belonged to Mr. Luckett in the bedroom, and 1.9 grams located on somebody's person. A total of the items were 849 grams of marijuana, 20.7 grams of cocaine, 11 pills of amphetamine, oxycodone was 79 pills, 7.5 aprazolam pills, 75 oxycodone pills, and 13 full pint-sized bottles of promethazine, which is used for the street drug called drank or scissor. And the following warrants were obtained. During the interview of Mr. Luckett and Mr. Autrey, both of them admitted to staying in the bedroom, and that's where we located the 3 firearms, and Mr. Luckett and Mr. Autrey admitted to smoking marijuana. Mr. Luckett admitted to taking pills, and that's what I have right now.
Do we know who the apartment belongs to?
It belonged to a female that I later located, but I have not been able to locate her since.
Okay.
During my interview, none of them actually knew who it belonged to except Mr. Luckett. He did say that he knew it belonged to a female.
Any idea how we get from the female renting the apartment to these 2 basically living in it?
I'm going to object to that, Judge. I don't know that they were living there. They're just there. 9 people are there.
Okay. Well, is there any information that we know of how the female rented the apartment, but these 2 admitted to living in the bedroom, or staying in the bedroom?
The only connection that I have is it's a large connection out of Mississippi. That is the connection that everybody is tied into. That most of the individuals that were located in the apartment arrived that morning at 4 a.m. by bus, and they showed me the bus ticket to prove that they arrived, and everybody's testimony that quite a bit of them that weren't charged had just arrived that morning.
Now, there were 9 people found. These 2 defendants admitted to staying in the bedroom of the 1-bedroom home. Now, are the other 7, had they just arrived from Mississippi?
3 of them arrived by bus that we confirmed with the bus ticket that they had on their person. And another one was seen on surveillance a few days prior. He was also charged. And another individual that had outstanding warrants for the same items, and he was observed in the apartment. He was also charged.
So I'm still missing 2 people.
3. Give me a second. Okay. Three. There were 2 people that arrived also by vehicle that morning. They were released.
And those 2 people that arrived by vehicle had not been seen on previous
No.
surveillance, anything like that?
No, during our pre-surveillance of the search warrant, we observed them pulling into the apartment complex.
Okay.
Never seen them before during any of our surveillance.
Now, were the defendants Mirandized?
Everybody was.
Did the defendants indicate in their Mirandized interview how long they've been staying at this apartment?
We'll go through Mr. Luckett's. For at least 24 hours. Mr. Luckett did, and Mr. Autrey didn't exactly specify the amount of time, but he was there with Mr. Autrey because he said he was his caretaker.
Did they give any statements regarding ownership or possession of the items found inside the home?
No, everybody denied everything other than the 3 firearms that were located in the bedroom where during the execution of the search warrant, both Mr. Autrey and Mr. Luckett were seen exiting that bedroom. Everybody denied the dope charges and not knowing anything about it other than pretty much everybody, including Mr. Luckett and Mr. Autrey, admitted to smoking dope, and Luckett that he takes pills for pain.
Is there any evidence or information you can provide to the court regarding, independent of what they said, of how long they've been at that apartment?
I only, during the surveillance, I did not observe Mr. Luckett or Mr. Autrey entering or exiting the apartment. I'm not saying that Mr. Luckett could not. He is wheelchair bound. It is difficult because it is on the 3rd floor, but we didn't see much foot traffic in and out of that apartment after the first day of our surveillance. It just went stagnant and nobody really came and got onto the apartment.
How long had you been doing surveillance on the apartment?
A week.
And during that time, you didn't see Mr. Autrey or Mr. Luckett come in and out of the apartment?
No. We saw several people the first day, including one of the main targets that I was targeting. And he came and grabbed one of the other people that were charged. They left the apartment. And other than that, I did see a couple people come with the family to visit that apartment. They stayed for approximately half an hour and they left shortly after. Other than that, I did not see anybody come, other than their statement that they admitted to being there at least 24 hours.
Was there surveillance on this apartment for 24 hours a day?
No, there was not.
Is this the evidence that you have to present to the court?
Other than, we had a little issue with the download of Mr. Luckett's cell phone. We're slowly getting the information. During the download, we did notice that on his cell phone, pretty much every single piece of item that we located in the apartment, he has pictures of on his cell phone, and several communications to indicate drug transactions, like people contacting him so they could come by and pick something up and how much he would sell it to them for.
Okay. So that's Luckett's phone, you said?
Yes, that's the only phone that we had a code for to get into.
Okay. And Luckett's phone actually contains photographs of the items that you found inside the home?
Yes, ma'am.
As well as communication with other people regarding the sale and distribution of narcotics?
Yes.
Now, the 3 handguns that were found in the bedroom, where were they found exactly?
I don't have the exact location. We just, because like I said, it was only a 715 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment. There was very little furniture in that apartment. All it was an air mattress where Mr. Autrey was staying at. Mr. Luckett was on the actual bed. It had one nightstand in the living room. It had a couch and a TV stand with a small flat screen. That's the only furniture that was in the apartment.
Is there any other additional information that you would like to provide to the court regarding probable cause?
No, ma'am.
Do you see Mr. Autrey and Mr. Luckett on the screen today?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you identify him for the court, please?
Mr. Autrey is to the far right, not wearing the mask, and Mr. Luckett is wearing the mask in the middle.
Okay. And that's all the questions I have, Judge.
Mr. Lewis, cross.
Thank you very much, Judge. Investigator Carrero, good morning.
Morning.
Let me start here. You had a search warrant for a female's apartment on Sugarloaf Parkway. Can you tell me her name?
Yes, I can. Let me look through the lease agreement. The lease agreement shows, I'll have to spell it for you. Taylaih Robinson, common spelling. I didn't want to butcher the name.
That's fine. It may be Talia Robinson. That's fine. Ms. Robinson. So you have a search warrant for Ms. Robinson's apartment at 223. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, 223. Now, here's my question. I don't really need to get deep into the search warrant, wiretap, confidential informant, but my question is, did you receive any information in pursuing that search warrant which indicated that my client, Anthony Autrey, was involved with anything?
I got the information that a confidential informant said that was what he called a trap house. And that
Trap
basically,
house.
yes, that a lot of drug activity was being sold to and from that apartment.
Did he tell you who was doing that? Did he give you Anthony Autrey's name, or did he give you a description of the caretaker for the person that's in the wheelchair? Did he give you a role or a description or anything that would have said Anthony Autrey is the person that we're looking for when you executed the search warrant?
The information that I gathered was a phone call would be made, and that phone call would be made to a runner, and that person would meet somebody at the apartment and would sell the narcotics. It was definitely never somebody specific and never the same person.
Okay. Now the confidential informant, he called it a trap house, but when you went there, what was your impression? Was it a smokehouse with people using there? Was it a stash house? Was it a flop house? Or was it a trap house? What was your impression?
I would say it's a mix of everything, because as we were entering the breezeway, the overwhelming smell of marijuana was coming from the apartment. And then as soon as that door opened, it just hit you in the face. Once you got in, even with the door open after a few hours, you could still smell the heavy odor of marijuana.
Okay.
The fact that there was very little to no furniture in the house or the apartment, so many people staying there, and just narcotics was scattered throughout. I mean, you couldn't, because the apartment was so small, you couldn't go in any room without finding narcotics anywhere in that apartment.
Okay, and if I understand you correctly, once was the door open, or did the police breach the door?
No, they had to breach the door. They wouldn't open the door.
Okay, so law enforcement's on the outside identifying themselves as law enforcement, but nobody comes to the door, and you have to breach the door. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if I understand you correctly, 9 people inside, and all 9 people made a statement. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. 3 people were arrested in total. Is that right?
3? No.
How many people were arrested in total?
There were. I will tell you right now. 1, 2, 3, 4 were arrested, and 1 was taken into custody for outstanding warrants out of Mississippi.
Okay, 4 people were arrested, and it sounds like everyone denied possession of all of the drugs that were in the apartment. Is that right?
Yes, all 9 of them.
Okay. Did any of the 3 that were arrested that was not my client, or the person that was taken in on a warrant, indicate that my client was selling anything or had possession of anything?
Nobody indicated that they knew anything about anything.
Okay.
Nobody.
Okay, that's fine. From the point where the police started knocking to identify themselves to the time they breached the door, was that less than 30 seconds, more than a minute? About how much time elapsed, if you know?
I really couldn't, but we always do a reasonable amount of time. They knock approximately probably 3 times. Once they heard several, a lot of commotion coming from the apartment. We had perimeters, officers set up. And as soon as they started knocking, the bedroom screen window came flying out and almost hit one of the officers on the bottom floor, where he saw somebody stick his head out. He could not identify who he was, but he did tell him, "Don't do it." And then they went back in, and by that time, we had to breach the door.
Okay. And if I understand you correctly, everything's in the apartment somewhere, but nothing is on anyone's person. Is that right?
Just a small marijuana on somebody's person once we were taking them into custody.
Of the 9 people that you spoke to, all of those interviews were recorded. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay. And it sounds like they might have been trying to hotbox the actual apartment, given the amount of odor that you were smelling. Did everybody appear to be under the influence?
It's hard to tell. You know, I will say this based on my training, knowledge, and experience. If you're a heavy marijuana smoker, sometimes you can't even tell that they're high because they're so fluently high all the time. Everybody answered the questions coherently. They understood all the questions. They didn't seem distraught. Everybody knew exactly what was going on. At no time did I feel that anybody was that high that they needed any kind of medical attention or they didn't understand what was going on.
Okay. And I may have missed it. Did you indicate that my client, when he spoke to you after you read him his Miranda rights, that he lived at the apartment?
No, that he was staying there for approximately, he couldn't really tell me exactly, but he said definitely 24 hours.
Okay. 1 second, Judge.
Several of the other individuals that came by bus, they indicated to us that Mr. Luckett was the one that told them to come to that apartment.
Okay, good. So if I understand your testimony correctly, Luckett is sort of directing everything between the statements of the other between the statements of the other people in the apartment, and you're looking at Lockett's phone and Lockett having pictures of things, various drugs that were in the apartment itself. It appears that Lockett may be the person, I don't know if he's the runner or the person that's selling out of the apartment. It seems like a strange arrangement right now to me, but
it's hard to really tell what, I mean, the text messages do show that he is orchestrating drug deals based on the interview of all the other suspects that arrived that morning. When we asked, who makes you, how do you just leave Mississippi and come to Georgia? And who do you know here? They all indicated that Mr. Luckett was the one that told them where to go. And then they were all stating some other things that really isn't relevant to the case.
Did they know? Did they know about Anthony Autrey's relationship to Mr. Luckett?
The only relationship, it's you got to understand, when you're interviewing 9 people, everybody says, "Oh, he's my cousin, but he's not blood. He's my brother, but he's not blood." Somehow or another, everybody knew somebody in the apartment, but nobody was actual blood relatives.
Okay. Did any of the other 9 people, not any of the other 7 people, not Mr. Luckett or Mr. Anthony Autrey, indicate that they knew the relationship between Anthony Autrey and Mr. Luckett?
No. Mr. Autrey was the only one that indicated that he was a caretaker for Mr. Luckett.
Okay. All right. No further questions. Thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Ms. Fagan?
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to start with the search warrant. The probable cause to the search warrant, was that the anonymous tip?
No, it was not.
Okay, it was based off your surveillance?
No, it was not.
Okay, could you tell us what the underlying probable cause was for the search warrant?
Your Honor, at this time, I'm going to object. This is for probable cause regarding the warrants. I understand where Ms. Fagan wants to go. However, any motions that will stem out of the search warrant will obviously, 1, be provided in discovery, and 2, can be argued in Superior Court.
Ms. Fagan, you want to respond?
Your Honor, I'll rephrase the question.
Okay.
When you actually execute the search warrant, did you expect these 9 individuals to be in this apartment?
No, ma'am.
Okay. You expected 1 or 2?
Yes, we expected the max 4, but definitely 1 or 2.
Okay. And specifically, you were looking for 2 people that are known to be at this apartment selling drugs?
We were looking for 2 individuals that one of them had his vehicle parked in the parking lot that we assumed he would be there, and one of the other persons that we located or we observed during surveillance earlier that week.
Okay.
Those were the definite 2 people that we thought would be in the apartment.
And the definite 2 people that you were looking for are Georgia residents, correct?
I don't really know where their residence is. They have like I said, everybody there has a very, very heavy tie to Mississippi. So everybody's address came back to a Mississippi address.
Okay. So, but 8 of them had arrived at this apartment within the last 24 hours?
I can say that. Jones, 2 arrived by vehicle that morning. 1, 2, 3 arrived by bus that morning at 4 a.m. And the others were there more than just that morning.
Okay. And at what point in your surveillance the week prior to the execution of the search warrant, at what point have you seen Mr. Luckett before?
Mr. Luckett, I did not, like I said, because he was wheelchair bound. It was even hard for them to get him down the steps when they put him into custody because there is no ramp, there is no elevator, and it is on the 3rd floor.
Right. But throughout this entire surveillance that you performed on this apartment, you've never seen Mr. Luckett or his wheelchair, correct?
Right.
Now, when you were discussing, and you also maintained that this apartment, the way that this apartment would work was that drug users would contact the drug dealer and then a runner or somebody would come downstairs and make the transaction?
No, the phone call would be made to the main, what we assume is the main guy. He never made contact with anybody at the residence. He would contact somebody either at the apartment or to meet at the apartment. They would walk up to the apartment, knock, go in, do the deal, and walk out shortly after.
Okay. And that main guy, though, that's not Mr. Luckett, correct?
No.
And as far as when you mentioned a runner, though, you did not determine Mr. Luckett as a runner, correct?
No, like I said, I never saw Mr. Luckett until that time. And Mr. Autrey, when we questioned Mr. Autrey, why would they have picked the 3rd floor apartment? Mr. Autrey said that he would have to carry Mr. Luckett on his back if he ever left the apartment. And nowhere did anybody indicate that Mr. Luckett ever left the apartment once he was there.
Right. So it's safe to assume that when you executed your search warrant, Mr. Luckett had arrived relatively soon if he had not yet left since his arrival.
Based on his interview, he told me he was there a minimum of 24 hours prior to us executing the search warrant. So
Okay.
All I have is based on what he told me.
Right. But out of the 1 or 2, max of 4 people that you were expected to be in that apartment, Mr. Luckett was not one of them.
No.
Okay.
None of the arrestees that we had were the ones that we expected to be in the apartment.
Okay. Because ultimately, throughout your surveillance, they were not people that you were looking for. They just happened to be there at the time?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you discussed my client's phone, Mr. Luckett's phone, you said there were pictures on his phone. Did you see when those pictures were taken?
No, like I said, we were having issues downloading the cell phone, and the person downloading the cell phones went through it prior to giving it to me, which I was having a hard time. That investigator said that he was the one that inscribed all the evidence when we were at the apartment, and he said that every bit of narcotics that we seized in the apartment, the pictures were on Mr. Luckett's phone.
But you have no evidence if those pictures were taken a year ago, 6 months ago, a week ago.
I don't, but the fact that they were in the exact same packaging, the exact same location, it's like it was taken at the apartment in the positions. It wasn't like on display. It was just taken like maybe for sale.
Okay, but your but I mean, you went through a long list of items found in the house. Now, you said Mr. Luckett was found in the bedroom.
Yes.
Okay. Was he found asleep?
By the time we got in there, everybody was awake.
Okay. Well, you testified that you saw him exiting the bedroom?
Yes, because he's in a wheelchair, we weren't aware of that. He had to crawl his way out.
Okay. So there wasn't, so specifically in the bedroom, where his wheelchair was located in the bedroom as well?
Yes.
Okay. And in the bedroom, you only found 9.7 grams of marijuana and 3 Glocks?
Yes.
And where were those Glocks located?
Like I said, I don't know exactly. We don't go into detail. It just shows the bedroom. I was downstairs doing the interviews. They located it in that small bedroom.
So you wouldn't know if the Glocks were located under the bed or on top of a shelf in the closet?
No, I would not.
And you
The pictures would show.
Okay. And have you reviewed the pictures?
Not right now, no.
Okay. And you're not aware if Mr. Luckett would be unable to reach the firearms?
I would not know either way, whether he would or wouldn't be able to reach them.
But none of the guns were found on his actual possession, correct?
Well, by the time we entered that apartment, none of the 6 firearms were on anybody's possession. They were just scattered throughout the apartment like they all threw them. Nothing, the answer to your question, none of the firearms were located in any kind of a hiding spot. It was just scattered like if somebody dumped them before. So when we came in, we didn't see them with the firearm on them.
Okay. But you don't have any evidence Mr. Luckett fired, correct?
I'm sorry?
But you don't have any evidence of Mr. Luckett dumping a firearm, correct?
No, we don't have any evidence of any of the firearms being dumped, but somehow 6 firearms were encountered scattered throughout the apartment.
Okay. And on Mr. Luckett specifically, he didn't have any cash, any money on him, correct?
Surprisingly enough, no cash was located. But on Mr. Luckett's cell phone, we did find a lot of text messages telling people to cash app him, to send him cash by app when they were doing the drug transactions.
Okay. But you can't testify to when those text messages were.
I can if I were to actually, like I said, we were just downloaded. The finished download was yesterday, and I was briefly able to look at it. It has a timestamp to exactly the dates and times. I just haven't had a time to go through he has over 3,000 pictures, videos. I mean, there's so much information there that there's no way that I would have time to go through all of it for this prelim.
Okay. But are you able to testify whether or not that information was put in that phone within these 24 hours that my client was at this location?
The fact that the pictures of the narcotics were on there as well, I would say yes.
But you're not okay, so when were the pictures put on the phone, sir?
I don't know. I don't know the timestamp of when it was taken.
Right,
but he said he was there 24 hours prior to, and the pictures on his phone show exactly the drugs that were located in the apartment. I'm assuming all those pictures were taken within 24 hours.
Okay, but the issue is that you're saying I'm assuming. So you are unable to testify that those pictures correlate with the time frame of these 24 hours that he is at this apartment.
To correct? The best of my knowledge, that's what I believe.
All right, I think we've exhausted this issue. I understand.
Thanks, Judge. Okay. Now, when you spoke to my client, did you pull up his criminal history?
No, we don't have access to that when we're on scene.
Okay. When now you also mentioned that you saw that Luckett lived there in your direct testimony. Did you find any clothes of Mr. Luckett?
Everybody had some amount of clothes that were located in the apartment.
Okay, because they had all told you that they had just came from Mississippi for a trip?
Yes.
And that's the reason that they were at this apartment?
Yes.
Okay, but not that anyone lived there, correct?
At that time, they were staying there.
Okay, and you found no items, like no bills in my client's name, correct?
No.
No mail addressed to, correct?
There was absolutely no mail or no documentation with nobody's name inside that apartment.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Ralph, any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor, Investigator Carrero, based off your training and experience, this amount of marijuana, cocaine, pills, the oxyalprazolam, the prometheline, is that more indicative of with intent to distribute rather than personal use?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've never actually encountered that many scattered throughout the apartment the way we did. Normally we find a certain stash in a drawer or we find a certain stash in a safe. But the fact that it was scattered throughout the apartment, it seemed like it was just ready. Whenever somebody knocked, they would just grab it and serve it at the door.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Judge, may I ask one question?
Go ahead.
Investigator, of the 9 folks that you spoke to, did anybody tell you that they were performance artists, rap artists?
Nobody made that indication at all.
Okay.
Nobody really even said that they had a job.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bacon, anything else?
One question. Out of the 9 people that you came into contact with, you were looking for 1 or 2. Were you able to arrest the 1 or 2 the people that you were looking for?
One of the individuals was, and the second one arrived shortly after, but we couldn't tie him to anything at that time. But it's still under investigation.
Thank you.
All right, can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
No objection, Judge.
No objection.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Anything else for the state, Ms. Ralph?
None, Your Honor.
Mr. Lewis, anything for the
Judge, no evidence, only argument.
Ms. Fagan, anything, any witnesses for you?
No witnesses, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Lewis, do you want to start with the argument?
Yeah, that's fine, Judge. Judge, let me say this first. I'm always shocked at certain evidence, at how everyone, it seems like everyone but me just seems like it's just pedestrian. What he just told us about is like a red box drug service. There are pictures that are taken. You go online, you look and you see, oh, I like that movie. You then go over there and you pay. You don't use any cash. You cash app it or use a credit card, and you get the kind of drugs and you leave. It's not registered to any of the people that are arrested. There's some third person, like the red box doesn't belong to the Walmart, and everybody sort of receives the testimony. I don't know, maybe everybody just conceals it better in their face. I've never even heard of this red box drug delivery service. Brand new, never heard it before. So of course I'm sort of just sort of super curious about how the whole thing goes. Put that aside for a second. This obviously is all Mr. Luckett. How does it work when there are 4 or 5 people standing around the red box waiting to take out a movie? We're all just waiting to take out a movie. We don't own Redbox. Everybody's inside the apartment. The investigator tells you most of the people, we've got to believe, are smoking, because he tells you about all the drugs in the air going into the apartment, even after they open up the apartment. So it seems like he says it's a trap house, but typically a trap house you're selling, you're not smoking. So this sounds a little bit like a smokehouse, but it also may be a flop house. I'm not quite sure. But clearly there are people smoking. Nobody, the warrant doesn't mention my client's name or any description of anybody that would sound like my client. Nobody else in the apartment identifies my client as having any connection with Mr. Luckett other than my client saying he's the caretaker. Between the time the police officers knock and say, hey, this is the police, they tell you everybody's running around, everybody's dumping guns, everybody's dumping drugs. We don't know who came from Mississippi that's dumping drugs. We don't know if the other person that had the warrant is dumping drugs or dumping guns. I don't know who had 1 gun or 3 guns. But for purposes today of preliminary hearing, Judge, what we have is my client, Mr. Anthony Autrey, being merely present. The same way the other folks came in and they've got their ticket and they're merely present, my client is merely present. He may be, in fact, staying there, but he's still merely present. There's no evidence that there was any drugs in the apartment before any of these folks came from Mississippi. I'm not quite sure if they brought some of the drugs. Obviously, they didn't bring all of it because Mr. Luckett has some photos of the drugs like Redbox. These are the movies available if you like horror movies. He's got a bunch of pictures. So there's clearly enough evidence against Mr. Luckett to bind Mr. Luckett over, but nobody's talking about the connection of my client. Nobody, if my client is mentioned on the search warrant, that would have been fine. How about if my client is the boyfriend of Taylor Robinson? That's fine too. But we have just my client there, mere presence, just like the folks coming in from Mississippi, and that's why I would argue judge charges against him should be dismissed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Routh, I'm going to let Ms. Fagan go next, and then you can respond to both.
Absolutely, Judge.
All right, Ms. Fagan.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not sure where it gets to be that Mr. Luckett the head of the ring of this apartment. The officer has been performing surveillance. They were looking for one or two people. One of the people were there when they arrived. One person arrived there after they arrived, but they weren't able to connect them to the apartment. But ultimately, the other 8 individuals have just arrived within the last 24 hours, Your Honor. And I would argue that that's mere presence as well. Now, information regarding his phone, it's very important to know when those pictures were taken. It's very important to know when those text messages were performed, because if they had just arrived in the last 24 hours, who's to say that those pictures weren't taken wherever he came from, or what the purpose of those pictures were? Your Honor, my client is handicapped. He has been in a wheelchair for 2.5 years, so I wouldn't offer any sort of runner for the apartment complex. It's a bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. They shouldn't have been there at the time that the police were performing a raid. Your Honor, I would argue that there is probable cause for possession as far as constructive possession, because there was only 9.7 grams of marijuana found in the bedroom that my client was located. But I would argue that it should be bound over as possession and not possession with intent.
Ms. Rao?
Your Honor, and I'll probably never live this down with Mr. Lewis, but my argument more coincides with, and my logic more coincides with Mr. Lewis's argument before the court. The strongest evidence that was presented to this court has been regarding Mr. Luckett. And the optics of it are a little bit weird, obviously, because Mr. Luckett is in a wheelchair. However, what we have is the officer testifying that there are numerous photographs that were already pulled off of his cell phone, albeit we haven't gotten timestamps yet, but that every single item that was found during the search warrant, they found a corresponding photograph on his cell phone. Also on his cell phone, they located communications between him and God knows who else about the distribution, the selling, the pricing of narcotics. They also then found Cash App transactions about drop me the Cash App here. And then you also have that officers were able to identify a large majority of the people that were found in the home as having just recently arrived, either by way of proof of bus ticket, gas ticket. And I understand Mr. Luckett says, I've been here for at least 24 hours, so he's hedging. However, you also have those witnesses telling law enforcement that Luckett's the one who told us to come to this apartment. The evidence that presented, and with the sheer amount of drugs found in the officer testimony, that this amount of drug is not consistent with personal use. It's much more consistent with possession with intent. I ask that you bind over Mr. Luckett's charges as the warrants have been taken out for.
Okay, if I can hear about Mr. Autrey.
I submit.
Well, before you submit, let me ask you to comment on the fact that is there anything other than him being there? Was there anything testified to?
No, not in my opinion. Obviously, the investigation is still ongoing. Obviously, I don't know if law enforcement is still looking at cell phones related to Mr. Autrey. There may be future charges, but as I sat here, I did not see anything that specifically tied Mr. Autrey to any of the drug transactions like Mr. Luckett's testimony.
All right.
Judge, if I could just remind you, the officer said there was only one.
Mr. Lewis, I wouldn't.
Sorry?
I wouldn't.
Oh,
I think you're
all right. All right.
I'm going to bind over the warrants for Mr. Luckett as charged. I'm dismissing the warrants against Mr. Autrey. I think all we have is presence right now. As Ms. Routh said, the future, who knows what that holds. Ms. Fagan, given the nature of these charges, do you have a bond hearing scheduled in front of Superior Court?
I do, but I was going to ask to be heard on bond today.
Before you make that motion, I'd like Ms. Ralph to go into criminal history.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, this is his first time arrest.
Okay. All right. That was a short history. Ms. Fagan.
I will tell you, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I apologize. He does appear to have a hold out of Mississippi for him, and his birthplace, his address, I believe, is out of Mississippi as well.
Okay. Ms. Fagan, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. My client is 21 years old. He is in a wheelchair. We do have a hold out of Mississippi for a domestic case. This is his first felony arrest in life. I do have a Mississippi address for a physical address that he lives at, but he does have a family member here in Gwinnett County that would be willing to allow him to live there if Your Honor wishes for him to stay in Georgia. If Your Honor wishes any conditions of ankle monitoring or anything of that nature, we are open to that. He has no failure to appears on his record. He is not a threat to the community or any witnesses in this case. He has been in custody for 1 month. Ultimately, Your Honor, we do have 10 charges. I would be asking for $5,000 on each charge, a total of 50.
Ms. Ralph?
Your Honor, the state would be opposed to bond in this particular case. As previously stated, Mr. Luckett doesn't have any strong ties to the state of Georgia. The state's concern would be that if he were to bond out, he would not return and be a flight risk. And for that reason, we ask that you deny bond.
All right. Just given the nature of the charges in the testimony, I'm denying bond based on risk of future felony.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Mr. Luckett, I'll be there later today.
All right. Thank you. I think that concludes this hearing.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge, and I believe that concludes our business this morning.